Good evening. I want to encourage those of you who have not taken a seat yet to take a seat. I would also encourage those of you who have not grabbed a cookie yet to grab a cookie. That seems like the obvious thing to do. Welcome to all of you who are joining us here at Christ the King Lutheran Church in Bloomington. And I assume those who are also joining us online. It's wonderful to be together with all of you. My name is Pastor Per Hallis. I'm the pastor here at Christ the King, and I have been called upon by my employer, Peggy Indall, to welcome all of you and to invite you to a moment of prayer, to give some time and some space for us to ground ourselves in this beautiful and yet challenging calling we have been brought together by to care for the needs of our neighbors. So I invite you to join me in a word of prayer. Holy One, we come to you this night with open hearts. We come to you this night with heavy hearts. We come to you this night thankful to be able to gather together, thankful for the ways that we can contribute. We also come with cares in our hearts. Please be with all of those this night who do not have adequate housing. Please be with all of those who have the power to affect people's ability to have adequate housing. And be with us as we seek to do the right thing. We also know that this community and the communities that surround this community are in pain tonight. Be with all of those who mourn the loss of Melissa and Mark. Hold their family in your loving and tender care. And hear us as we pray without words for the loss that this community is experiencing. Source of all that is good, source of all that is true, source of all that is, hear our prayers. Amen. I'm going to hand it over to Ben.
Thank you, Pastor Hollis. So my name is Ben Helvig Anderson. I'm the Vice President of Policy and Organizing at Beacon. Before we dive into our program, 60-minute agenda here, just want to really thank everyone for coming and just really name the moment we are in that Pastor Hollis was just talking about, that the horrific of this week and the loss of Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark are really, heavy on all of our hearts. And Beacon staff, we had a long meeting this morning kind of debating and going over if we should even hold this event today because of this, and really decided let's move forward in the spirit of holding the great work that Melissa Hortman would have wanted us to do, but also holding in community together the immense grief so many of us feel around that. And so I just want to name that, and name that. I know maybe some folks weren't even able to come tonight because of it, and hopefully if you're watching live stream or one of the recordings later, that's all right, and hope you can participate that way as well. To try to honor the moment and to hold us in community around that, and all of our, especially as Beacon, who work Speaker Hortman on many things, and also she was instrumental in moving forward our Bring It Home policy a couple years ago, and so many of the great housing policies she was always a huge champion for. We created a kind of big poster card out there that so if you didn't see that coming in, please, if you want to write a note or write any feelings or just sign your name on it. And then some of us will bring that over to kind of the spontaneous memorial that is there, just to leave all of our sentiments and love for her there. So if you can do that, that would be great. And then we also have a get well soon card for Senator John Hoffman, another great leader in our community, you know, who is recovering from his tragic occurrence as well, and his wife. So if you didn't have a moment to stop at that table before, please take a moment to do that on your way out if you are able. With that then, again, thank you for being here, and we will jump into our program. Invite up Nicole. To start us, just really, the program tonight is kind of threefold. We hope to ground everyone in what supportive housing is and what does it look like in the specific, because then we're going to jump up to the complicated and of housing policy and how the federal government works, which I'm still learning myself. And so Peggy's going to lead us through that, and then we're going to try to really help people understand what does that mean for the organizations that are trying to do this in our community right now, and we'll have a great panel to present that, and then we'll jump into action steps about what we can do from this. And that this program here is one of three kind of identical events we're doing kind of across the metro. So one Wednesday will happen in St. Paul, and then in a couple weeks another one in Minneapolis, very similar to this. So again, welcome, and welcome Nicole to start us off.
Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. I would like to start out with the fact that I take issue with being back to this event, but I think it's appropriate. First of all, my name is Nicole Harvey, and I am the Supportive Housing Partnership Manager who represents Beacon for quite a few of our supportive housing properties. Now, the reason why I stress my title is because I'm sure none of you know what that means. And I didn't. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I don't know what that means. I did not know what supportive housing meant until I started working for Beacon. So, as I said, being the it is appropriate because I am new to this field. I have been in this role for a year and a half. I have been with Beacon longer than that in various roles, but in this role in particular, it's been a year and a half. So what my long title means, and I mean it's long, it is the longest title in every meeting I attend, is that my job is to ensure that the partners that we collaborate with stay in alignment with Beacon's mission. So in Vista 44, which is one of our newest developments, actually Emerson Village is our newest, but only by a few months, but Vista 44 is my property. We contract with VOA, we contract with Shelter Corps, we contract with Intel, and all of our partners work in this building. My job is to make sure that as we all work to achieve our objectives in support of the families that live within this building, that we remain in alignment with Beacon's mission, which is to ensure that everybody has a home. Believe it or not, that doesn't always align. So I like to think of it, and it's hard for me to only talk with one hand. I normally talk with two. But is that I think of it as it used to be a tricycle, right? But that was before we brought in security as a full-fledged partner, because we realized we are working with vulnerable families and they need to have a safe, secure environment as well as a stable environment. So now they are a full-fledged partner. So it is a wagon, and I have to make sure that all four of those wheels are going in the same direction in support of our families. Okay, and as I stated, it's not always the case, right? Because property management is about making sure rents are paid. Security is about making sure that everybody is safe and secure. Supportive service is about advocating, about coming up with a plan. And then me, as the owner, making sure that we are all in alignment, making sure that people have a home. So, on the ground level, in Vista 44, where I go to every Wednesday, I say that with a smile, because for as much as I love my families, and I'm gonna say it again, because I mean it, and I'm making you believe it, I'm making me believe it. I love my families. It can be difficult. It can be difficult because we have families that are transitioning, right, from being long-term homelessness. And so that doesn't necessarily automatically mean that they're going to be the best neighbors. It doesn't automatically mean that they know that they should pay their rent on time. It doesn't automatically mean that now I have a great, wonderful place to live, that I don't invite all the bad actors in my life to come in because they need housing too, right? So as I stated, we then, within this building, our partners, we get together and we teach. That's what supportive housing is. It's not you mess up and you go. You gotta go. Your lease is terminated. Your rent is not paid. Your lease is terminated. You have these bad actors who are adversely affecting you, the community. You have to go. You are now homeless again. We work and we teach and we instruct on how. And I need to say that again because it's about these teachable moments. That's how our families remain housed. We give them chances to redeem themselves. We give them instruction. A lot of outside entities view that as hand-holding, but that's assuming that people have the same level of knowledge. Not everybody has the same level of knowledge or were experienced or brought up in the same, just to put it bluntly, middle-class norms, right? It's like, I'm doing better, I'm gonna bring you along with me to do better. Not recognizing that you're the one who's making me do worse in the first place, right? So we help our families navigate that. If you've never had to pay, how then we do expect them to come into this environment and then pay these bills timely? And with this environment, we allow them an opportunity to figure it out for themselves. I'm gonna say that again, figure it out for themselves. But when they don't, we help guide them to figure it out. And we then guide them along the way, okay? And so what Ben wanted me to speak to is that that's what makes supportive housing special. That is the nuts and bolts of what makes supportive housing special, because right there in-house, you have that. If you're having difficulty, it's not just about paying bills, it's about if there's a mental health crisis, if there's difficulty with your child in school environment, you can get that resource to assist you right there. You don't have to go outside. My own personal experience is having my doctor give me a referral, and I can't even get anybody to answer my call, right? Or how many calls do I have to make? And this is me being a professional. I'm supposed to know these things. I'm supposed to know how to maneuver these things. These families don't have to do that. They can just go right there and get what they need, or if it's not right they have someone who's there to help them navigate the systems that we all know can be extremely difficult. And that's what makes supportive housing special. Now, also, what makes supportive housing special is that everyone is having the same struggle. So there's community there. You're not in it alone. So we have at Vista, or what we're working on, so I'm projecting, I'm talking it into reality, a resident council, so that our resident, so it's not just Nicole, Miss Nicole, I don't know why they call me that, but Miss Nicole telling them what they need to do. So our resident council is coming together so that they can identify the issues that they're having within the building. What they're having right now are kids. We all have problems with kids. Kids, right? But schools are out, or schools have let out. So kids, a lot of energy. Nobody's going to bed when they need to. We have resident council. How do we address the kids not being in their units? But it's not me saying, hey, Susan, take care of your kid. It's the council saying, as parents who live here, Susan, please address your kids. Make sure they go to bed timely, because we all have to live here and we all want peace within our community. So that is what we are doing to foster a sense of community, foster buy-in to making Vista 44 a success. So that is one of that is coming together for Vista 44, as well as the other type of services that is being offered. We have a partnership with Sojourner Truth, and you have to excuse me, parents from the South, growing up in Minnesota, my tongue can be flat sometimes, I will mispronounce things, but it's Sojourner Truth who comes in once a month to conduct a workshop, domestic abuse, I don't want to say training, but so they have workshops to help our parents who are navigating that, as well as we have substance usage. Once again, I don't want to use training, but agencies that will come in and assist with that. We also have lease compliance mitigation. So, as I stated earlier in my presentation, we have families who have not lived in this type of environment before. So they are getting lease violations because they don't know that you can't have your music playing loud at midnight, right? They don't know that you can just leave your garbage out in the hallway. So they're getting lease violations. So we are having classes on how to be a good neighbor, how to mitigate those things. And they attend these classes and they learn how to correct that behavior. The other thing is that housing rules, right? So we have a whole class, I can't read that, but I'm almost done. Okay, so, but we have a whole class on how you can learn about these things before you even get a lease violation, right? So these are things that we are teaching our residents, so how they can come into this community, be a community, and make it their own, be their own, and that is what Vista 44 is about. And that is what supportive housing is about. And that's why it is very important that we continue with this continuum of care funding. And I think that's it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Wow, I learned a lot out of that, that's for sure. And, you hear about supportive housing, but the specifics, it was very interesting. Thank you, Nicole. So my name is Peggy Indahl, and I'm a member here at Christ the King Lutheran Church, and we're hosting tonight. So happy that you're here. And I'm here tonight to present on 3 things. So first, I would like to discuss what supportive housing is and how it fits into our community's response to prevent and end homelessness. And secondly, I'd like to discuss how supportive housing is funded and how it's connected to federal funding. And lastly, I want to talk about what is at risk with federal funding and what we can do about it. We're not powerless in this. So, I'm so glad that Ben said he's still learning about this because he put together this PowerPoint. And I had to learn as I was going, and there's a lot of information in here. So, time for all of us, and I think this is not going to be the last time that we talk about this. But first, we're going to talk about supportive housing. And so Beacon and the other organizations that are here are all participating in creative supporting housing. So as we heard from Nicole, supportive housing changes lives by providing stable housing and all those amazing on-site services. So it is Beacon's solution to homelessness because it creates the circumstances that allow people to find long-term stability. And for the last 2 decades, there has been a broad consensus that supportive housing is the solution to homelessness. So the next slide I found interesting on housing continuum and funding. So you see this from unsheltered to possibly home ownership. That's the goal for all of us, and all these steps in between. So you see supportive housing sitting in the middle of what is called this housing continuum. And here you see that supportive housing is that transition point between when an individual or family is experiencing homelessness and when they move into a place of housing with services. And this is what Beacon provides. So on the left side of the continuum, that's where the nonprofits do the bulk of the work and our community response to move people through this housing continuum. So, supportive services is funded in a very complicated and sometimes disorganized way. Private donations play a critical role. Public support from every level of government has the most significant impact. When we create and fund a supportive housing building like Vista 44 that we talked about earlier and pictured here, there's the building, it takes years to assemble all the correct pieces to make the building balance. And often it is sitting like this Jenga tower. Example here. So each different program and source of and a number of those blocks in most supportive housing buildings come from the federal government. So, when we lose one piece, it all falls down. If we lose one piece, it all... Yikes! Did you hear that? It's not a pleasant sound when they all fall down. And so, it's kind of a funny and lighthearted metaphor, but it's important to remember that we're not playing a game here, that these are real people. And I want you to take a look in the faces of some of these folks. They're from some of the Beacon properties, residents, and remember that that's what this is all about. For me, I am one that believes in home for everyone, for these folks and for others. And so it's why we do this work, right? And so it's important not to, in the midst of all of the noise and all of the policy, I mean, it's important to advocate, but don't lose sight of the people that we're working for. So, thank you for that. Yes, and they can be impacted by the tower collapsing. Those are the people that it hurts. So, at this point, Beacon has not lost any funding, but we need to be prepared for what could happen. So there are 3 ways we could lose funding for homelessness and housing programs. First, Congress could cut the funding through the federal budget process. The administration could eliminate the program or cut the funding on its own. We've seen this happen, types of cuts in the last few months, but most of these types often get stuck in the courts. But they could also slow down the approval process or tie the funding to new contract language that is impossible to fulfill. Again, none of this has happened yet, but we need to be prepared. So what I want to focus on is the federal budget process. But before we get to that, first of all, how many of you have heard of the big, beautiful bill? Yes, it's all over the news, right? And we hear about it, and we think because it's all about money, you probably assume that it was the federal budget. Well, it isn't actually the budget. It is a standalone bill that does only a certain number of things, and it does not actually touch housing and homelessness programs that we are talking about tonight. So just kind of wanted to set the record straight on that. But what it does do is fund continuing the president's tax cuts, increasing spending on defense and immigration enforcement. It dramatically cuts Medicaid and food stamps by changing how the program works so fewer people will be eligible for the entitlement. So this bill will have negative impacts, and there is a growing awareness of that, but we're not going to focus our time there tonight. There's a lot of people that are doing good work around this big, beautiful bill. What we're going to talk about is housing and homelessness programs that are funded through the federal budget, not through the big, beautiful bill. So this process begins with the president releasing his preliminary budget, which serves as a framework for how he intends to allocate funding to each government department. However, the budget is the real work of Congress, which, through the appropriations process, will create a new budget, or as it has often done in the past, in recent years, they'll pass a continuing resolution, essentially will use last year's budget. The president has released his budget, and it is now time for Congress to get to work. So, the president's budget. It's devastating for all housing and homelessness programs. You see here a New York Times headline reporting on this budget, and it says, "Trump seeks to end permanent supportive housing for the chronically homeless." This is true because his budget dismantles programs created under President George W. Bush that have funded our infrastructure, including homeless response and supportive housing. So one major program is the Continuum of Care, whose purpose is to help people transition through that housing continuum that we discussed in the beginning. It funds capital and services in supportive housing and a whole system called coordinated entry, which helps match people who are homeless with available units that fit them. You know, it's kind of funny because this stuff like goes on behind the scenes, and it's interesting to know what's going on back there. And it's a very necessary thing. So the president's budget also devastates Section 8 housing vouchers. These housing vouchers provide rent support for millions of low-income Americans, and the cuts would impact 3.8 million people. A big number. Many of these folks are supportive housing residents. So this budget isn't real. It sets the blueprint for what Congress will be working on all summer. And we cannot let this agenda of dismantling supportive housing and our whole community's homeless infrastructure take place. I think about the celebration that we had not that long ago at Vista 44, and it was just the culmination of so much work and blood, sweat, and tears that went into getting that building up, getting the people moved in, all pieces make that happen. And we can't lose that. We can't let the rug be pulled out from underneath those people. So, there's good news. There's something we can do. So we are aware that there's a great deal of noise occurring in our world at present. There are wars, constant drama, and unprecedented events coming from the White House. We have the debate over the big, beautiful bill. So while there are many ways to engage and make your voice heard in this mess, for housing, the most important thing we can do is talk about housing programs as they create the budget in DC. So in the noisy world of today, we have gathered you, all because we need to raise the volume on this important piece and make sure that nothing happens to it. So at the end of this evening, we have a next step. It's an action item. But before we get there, we will transition to hearing how the cuts I am describing would impact key organizations in this space.
Thank you so much, Peggy, and you did a great job with that presentation. And I hope everyone got something out of that, and we can email that out to folks also if you want to look through those slides. At this point, we want to transition to really hearing from providers connected to supportive housing. So I want to invite up our panelists, and I'll take a moment to introduce them all, and then we will ask them all some questions to get some good information here for all of us tonight. So first, I will go through in order here. So we have Chris LaTondresse, who is the CEO of Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative, President and CEO. Many of you maybe have met him, but wanted to bring him up here to give our broader Beacon. We have Steve Horsfield, the Executive Director of Simpson Housing. And then Julia Donaldson, who is the Senior Vice President, Program and Services and of Mission and Advancement at Volunteers of America, Minnesota and Wisconsin. And then part of our goal for these events was to engage the Minnesota congressional delegation around these issues and to really build a relationship with them between us all, the community of providers and the community of advocates, which have been so active at the local and state level, to really assist them on being active at the federal level. And so we're really excited. We have Jack Smyth here, who's one of the staff member from Senator Tina Smith's office. We're really excited to have him here. Yeah, let's give everybody a round of applause here. We were expecting a staff member from Representative Kelly Morrison's office, along with, she was going to record a personal video for us, but because of the events of this weekend, that all went out the window. And so she's promised to record us that video at a later date, and I'll email that out, of course, when that happens. So, but I will let each one of these panelists kind of describe their organizations and what they do with our first question, so you can learn a bit more about them. So my first question for everyone, and we're just going to pass this mic because this is the only live mic for both things, and just for our panelists, We have a live video feed also happening that we're recording. That's that little camera right in front of you. So you can speak to that and the audience and speak loudly into this microphone that does both. So first, if you could just describe your organization, who you serve, and what role you play in the homeless housing space. And then for the non-Beacon organizations, just what is your connection to Beacon, and how do you intersect with that, and what else do you do beyond that? So I'll start with Chris here, and then you can just pass the mic and then introduce yourself as you go.
Great. Good evening, everyone. It is so good to be in community tonight. It's always good to be in community, but as we move through the heartbreak and the horror of the events of this past weekend that continue into today, I'm also feeling a sense of resolve. Resolve to overcome the fear and division that hold us back from putting the people's work and our community work at the center. And the fact that each and every one of you are here tonight is a part of that resolve, is a part about continuing to put our community at the center. So I want to thank you for it, and that tonight of all nights, that is important as we move forward together. My name is Chris LaTondresse. It's my honor to be the president and CEO of Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative. I think of our work big picture as sort of in two primary lanes. Number one, in permanent supportive housing and affordable housing more broadly, but specifically on permanent supportive housing is the single largest provider of permanent supportive housing in the state of Minnesota, but holding that in community with other peer nonprofit organizations that hold this together, including some of the folks you'll hear from tonight, fellow operators and service providers in this space. And as you'll hear and have already heard tonight, permanent supportive housing really is the invisible backbone of our community response to homelessness. Number two is Beacon's role in the systems change space and the policy and organizing space, work that really found its genesis with a single congregation asking how to better love its unhoused neighbors, in that case living in its parking lot, and also overcoming a fierce community resistance to it. That was the genesis of Beacon's organizing work. As we've built that power together in congregations across the Twin Cities metro area, we've been able to turn that attention together to the state. But for most of Beacon's history, and I say this because this really is an unprecedented event for Beacon as we move into this space together, and we're so grateful for you all holding it with us. We have always advocated at a state and local level, but we have never focused on federal advocacy before. And as we oriented to this moment, first, better understanding for Beacon and for this work more broadly, what are the risks we're navigating? And we'll talk about some of those areas of risk. We've heard the metaphor of the Jenga tower. We'll talk about it in our work. Among the risks are, what do organizations stand to risk by speaking out in this moment? Knowing, in reality, that there are organizations that receive federal funding that have been stripped of that funding just because of what's appeared on their website or what leaders of those organizations have said in public. We know that to be true. It's true for one of the big national organizations, the Corporation for Supportive Housing. And we agreed at an organizational level that our role in this moment is to tell the truth. To tell the truth about the extraordinary leadership that over decades that has created our community response to homelessness across Republican and Democratic administrations at a federal level. To tell the truth about the role these programs play in holding our community solutions on homelessness and serving individual residents. And to tell the truth about what would happen if they go away. That is what we are here to do tonight.
Thanks, Chris. My name is Steve Horsfield. I serve as Executive Director at Simpson Housing Services. And the way that Simpson was founded was winter of 81-82, we saw a spike in the number of people experiencing homelessness. And in the city of Minneapolis in particular, the solution was that there was a bunch of churches willing to open their doors to operate shelter, 17 to be exact. And Simpson United Methodist Church at the corner of 28th and First Avenue, just off of Each Street there, was one of those churches. The work that began as a mission of that church ultimately spun off into a 501c3. We continue to operate shelter to this day, and we operate something called the Adult Shelter Connect, where we actually assign all of the shelter beds, about 800 beds each night across Hennepin County for single adults. What's interesting about the organization is all of the growth that happened really once we initiated that work with shelter. All of the growth that the agency has undergone since then has all been more in the category of what I would characterize as permanent solutions. So we now are a service provider to 600 units of supportive housing services across the metro. So we partner with developers like Beacon, like Aon, like Common Bond, a lot of organizations you may have heard of, as well as some private developers that you haven't. At the end of the day, what happens really, what drives our growth is that organizations want to develop affordable housing. They need money from the state of Minnesota, from the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency to do that work. And in order to get that money from the state stipulates that you have to have so many units set aside to be available to formerly homeless households. And then our phone rings, because we are a service provider, oftentimes the service provider of choice in those situations. And so we are honored. I won't belabor the story, but we were certainly excited to come in and start working with Beacon directly at 66 West in Edina. That was an exciting project to launch for young people in Minnesota, in Hennepin County, and also the first affordable housing, supportive housing project we had seen in the city of Edina in quite some time. And so that was a big deal for us to be able to do that work together, and we're grateful to be in partnership with Beacon. So Simpson operates, to simplify, we primarily operate shelter, the process of getting people indoors into shelter, and then we are a service provider on the supportive housing side of things. A couple things really quickly about solutions to homelessness. Shelter continues to be the best tool that we have in this country in terms of helping facilitate the initial stage of that journey from being unhoused to housing. It is absolutely vital. I know it's not fun to talk about, it's not easy to fund, and it's not real popular a lot of times, but it is absolutely vital that we have a safe place for that first night, for someone to be able to get indoors and start to see that something else is possible, so that we can begin the work of building a relationship and walk alongside that guest at our shelter along that pathway back to stable housing in our community. As Chris mentioned, moving on from there, the answer to homelessness is housing. It ain't rocket science. The answer to homelessness specifically in these cases is housing with the right amount of services for the right amount of time, depending on the case, the situation. A third of our shelter guests any night are working. So really what that looks like is just helping people get over that hump of getting into housing, advocating with landlords, dealing with some legal issues or some barriers that have held them up, whatever the case may be. And in some cases, it's much longer than that. We've got traumatic brain injury, we've got permanent mental illness, we've got chemical dependency, all these things going on. But at the end of the day, the math is still, it still works. It's the right thing to do for human beings. And it's the right thing to do for our communities to ensure that everyone in Minnesota has access to safe and stable housing, and that begins first with shelter and then with supportive housing. And I think that covers all my stuff, so I better pass this on.
Good evening. I'm Donaldson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Program Services and Mission Advancement at Volunteers of America. We like to shorten it to VOA. For nearly 130 years, VOA has been helping Minnesotans close the gap between where they are and what's possible. We serve nearly 22,000 Minnesotans across the state every year through an integrated approach to health, housing, and human services. We often say we serve people in the gaps, the ones who might fall through the cracks of disconnected systems. So children navigating school and trauma, teens struggling with mental health issues, families working hard but still unable to afford rent, elders and people with disabilities trying to live lives with dignity and independence across the lifespan, across abilities and differences. We show up, we wrap around people with the resources and support they need to feel seen, to feel stable, and to feel possible again. From affordable housing to behavioral health, to disability services, community justice, disability services, community justice, education, and older adult services. And what we've learned in the past 130 years is without housing, everything else is harder. That's why we believe housing is foundational to health, to stability, to employment, to connection, and to community. And VOA shows up in the affordable housing space as owners, property managers, and service providers. As part of a national affiliate system, we serve 25,000 people in 500 affordable housing properties across the country. Here in Minnesota, we 1,500 Minnesotans every year not only have a roof over their heads, but access to the support systems they need to stay stably housed and move forward. We're really proud to partner with Beacon and other organizations as service providers in this work, advancing a shared vision of highly affordable service-connected housing. From Vista 44 to the upcoming Prairie Point, and through joint advocacy and planning, we are committed to advancing a vision of every person having access to safe and stable housing in our community.
We're waiting on you, Jack, in just a minute here. But thank you all, and we're really honored to have these partners and organizations here today, because we really wanted to display and show the breadth of different organizations that are part of this wider community response around homelessness and housing for folks. And so for our three organizational panelists here, and then we'll get to Jack here in a second around the federal stuff, but when thinking of your organization and the great work you just talked about, what role does federal funding play? And if it was reduced or eliminated, what immediate effects would we see in our community?
Ben, can you bring me 4 of those bricks, please? And as he does, this is the point I want folks to leave with tonight. Actually, a few points. 3. Number 1, our community solutions on homelessness, of which shelter, permanent supportive housing, prevention strategies are all central tenets, are fragile, always have been, chronically underfunded, always have been, and therefore imperfect, always have been. But we will sure miss them when they're gone. We will sure miss them when they're gone. Second, and I said this before, permanent supportive housing is the invisible backbone of our homeless response system. And that's a system, and I mentioned it just a moment ago. Think of our homeless response system, our community solutions on homelessness, as really being anchored on 3 points. Number 1, prevention. Best way to end homelessness is just to stop it before it even starts, because once someone experiences homelessness, the odds that that becomes a permanent feature of their life significantly goes up. And we do that through housing support, rental assistance, a variety of strategies, sometimes cash assistance, sometimes somebody just needs a little help right now just to make rent while they wait for something else to come through, so prevention. Number 2 is our emergency response to homelessness. That's primarily our shelter infrastructure. If somebody's sleeping outside tonight and needs a place, a safe place to sleep, where can they go to be connected with both that shelter and with a human being, a professional who can help connect them to other systems? That happens in a shelter context. Third is supportive housing. There's nothing in terms of a public return on investment from a dollar standpoint or from an effectiveness standpoint that does more to stop homelessness than supportive housing. And that is why there has been this broad bipartisan consensus over multiple administrations that we need to adequately fund our responses to it. So these 4 bricks represent just four examples of the way that it works, federal funding works across Beacon's work, just represented at this table tonight. So if you think about that Jenga tower, I want you to think that every single one of those bricks is either labeled federal, state, local, or community. Community is us. It's philanthropy, it's generous individuals. But let's talk about those federal bricks. Each one of those might have a different label attached to it. There's sort of 3 principal labels that you could put on those federal bricks. Capital, this is the dollars needed for the bricks and mortar to build the building or to build the shelter or to do improvements. Number 2, operating. So this is the dollars from things like Section 8 or housing choice vouchers or project-based vouchers that pay for rents in supportive housing and in other housing settings. Number 3 is services. The funding needed to pay for services specifically in permanent supportive housing, which is what makes supportive housing supportive. So just here tonight, I'll award a couple of bricks, just in full transparency, of the federal funding that just sits in 66 West, partnership with Simpson, and at Vista 44 that we hold in partnership with VOA. So I'm going to give both of you a brick on, this is for operating funding. In both Vista 44 and in 66 West, we have what's called project-based Section 8. These are Section 8 vouchers that have been attached to individual units in perpetuity to pay the rents for the people living in those. And in the case of 66 West, that's young people. In the case of Vista 44, that's families. That funding goes away. It's not just that individual family that is destabilized. That could put the entire project at risk forever if that funding goes away. Number 2, we're going to talk about, actually I'm going to start over here. This is called HUD COC. So this is HUD Continuum of Care funding. It's a principal source of funding for services in supportive housing and is the principal source of service funding for families exiting homelessness at Vista 44. And finally, this is a brick. It's got ELP. It stands for program. It's actually an HHS program that is the federal government's primary response to youth homelessness, and it pays for our service funding on the ground for more than half of it. We were just talking about this past week. More than half of our service funding for young people at 66 West comes from that TLP brick. So when we talk about the role of federal funding, it is not the whole tower, but it represents critical bricks that if they are missing, the entire thing not only becomes less stable, as I mentioned, it's always been fragile and imperfect, it risks toppling the entire tower. It's why we need to step forward.
Okay, a couple things here. So, first question, I realized one thing that I forgot to touch upon, which is important as we are talking about federal policy. In this room at the racial makeup of all of us sitting in here, this is pretty indicative of what Minnesota looks like. It's 85, 90-ish% white, 10, 15%-ish communities of color. And you flip that around exactly upside down, and that's who we serve. So homelessness is a policy problem, and it's an economic problem. Who experiences homelessness is systemic racism. No ifs, ands, or buts. So let's be clear about that, and that is absolutely relevant when we talk about what this federal administration is up to right now. Everyone's clear on that, right? So make sure we get that out of the way. Okay, so as far as the role of federal government, all of this work, having been doing this work for the last 20 years, I think the way things are supposed to work, and I think when I look to government, what I'm looking for is infrastructure investment. That is the responsibility of our government systems, is to invest in infrastructure. So we've got roads to drive on and water in our pipes and housing. Housing is the most most simple, most fundamental element of infrastructure, in my opinion, and that's how we ought to be viewing these resources around housing. In particular, I know there's a lot of folks in this room who have been paying attention to this work or been actively involved in this work in recent years, and you probably have heard that we've done an amazing job solving homelessness for veterans in Minnesota, right? People have heard that? Is that fair? Yeah? Does anyone know how and why? Section 8. So the federal government issued special Section 8 vouchers specifically for veterans. So after the federal government gutted Section 8 and housing and urban development in the 80s, they finally stepped up and did the right thing for one subset of our population, which was veterans, over the course of the last, 5, 6, 7 years, and it worked. Shocking. So that's an important thing to pay attention to, is that when we're talking about losing programs, we are still way, way, way below water from where we should be with this. We've seen what happens when we do get good federal investment. It worked great for veterans, and we need to continue to expand upon that, and we can't see that go at risk. Real quick, does anyone in this room know what is the largest investment we make as a country in terms of housing programs, housing subsidies? Anyone know what that looks like or what it is? No, it's actually probably a lot of people in this room receive the mortgage interest tax deduction. What we get dwarfs any sort of program that we're talking about as far as this is concerned. So that's something that we all need to be making choices. We choices serve about a small percentage of our community, and we need to solve for that. So very specifically, I'll just wrap this up by saying, as far as immediate impacts go, Simpson, we have contracts, we have COC service contracts, as Chris was mentioning. We've got about $800,000 in those contracts. We had to swallow a pill and agree to things we didn't want to agree to sign those renewals on those contracts. Households that would have been put out of, and it would have been and so we had to remove things like the nature of this problem being institutional racism from our website to appease the yes. So those are the kinds of things that are happening right now. Those are the direct impacts that we are facing immediately. And the choices that we're making to not put people on the street.
So federal funding foundational. It literally powers everything from Medicaid reimbursements that help us provide quality behavioral health and disability services, to HUD programs that help keep families, elders, and people with disabilities stably housed, to programs for people returning to community and aging with dignity. It all comes back for our organization to public support. And again, we serve 22,000 Minnesotans every year, and without that, we do it. So these dollars aren't just budget lines, they're lifelines, especially for our neighbors who are experiencing some of the hardest moments of their lives. And we've already seen what happens when that funding goes away. Just recently, we lost federal support for a program that's been around for over 20 years. It mobilized 550 older adult volunteers every year in 11 Minnesota counties and 60 partner organizations, and overnight it was gone. The ripple effects were real, and they were immediate, and ultimately they impact thousands of Minnesotans. So if more cuts like these happen, the impacts won't be theoretical. It'll mean fewer services, longer wait lists, and more people in crisis, and more impossible choices between who gets help and who doesn't. And I think we're all touching on this. It's about people. It's about their health, it's about their housing, and it's about their ability to move forward. And while I know tonight's conversation is focused on affordable housing, I do want to touch on an issue that intersects with all of our work. Take Medicaid. It's one of those big part of the national and local conversation right now, and for very good reasons. It's one of those issues that's bringing many of us in the nonprofit sector together. In Minnesota, Medicaid or medical assistance covers 1 in 6 adults, 3 in 10 kids, 5 in 9 nursing home residents, 1 in 7 Medicare recipients, and 1 in 3 working age adults with disabilities. That is huge. And in the context of supportive housing, it's often the difference between stability and crisis for the families, older adults, and people with disabilities that we serve. So yeah, federal funding is how, I think we're all saying we uphold our social contract. It's how we say we're in this together, and we can't leave anyone behind. And tonight, I think we're all learning that there's something we can do about it.
Thank you. Appreciate those answers. So this is our representative, but we know we have the eight other. We have 2 senators here in Minnesota and 8 other representatives who can speak to this. But from your perspective, Jack, we know Senator Smyth has been a huge advocate of housing for her whole time there, and really appreciate her work to defend these programs. And so we wanted to get your perspective on how you're seeing these threats from Washington, D.C., and any kind of updates or ways you could let us know about what's happening around the federal budget.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for inviting our office to be part of this conversation. Again, I'm Jack Smyth. I cover housing, banking, and transportation out of our St. Paul office for Senator Tina Smith. The way that we're thinking about this threat, earlier in the presentation, you had a great breakdown of sort of the different prongs that this threat comes in, whether it's through congressional action, executive orders, as well as agency. And that's one lens that we're viewing this through. Another lens is, what have they done so far? What are they currently doing? And then what do we know that they're planning to do as well? So earlier on in the administration, there was a flurry of executive orders. And as those came through, we addressed them at the time, and through a lot of the work that you did, a lot of you reached out to our office, letting us know about how important the things that were being cut in the executive orders were. And now that that is sort of behind us, we are going back and making sure that the folks who maybe temporarily lost grants and then those grants came back online, checking back in with them to make sure that they were receiving grants. And then what we're currently viewing, the big beautiful bill, the reconciliation bill, that has very important stuff as well. And then what's coming down the pipeline? We know, based off of Project 2025 and some of the other things that folks have been telling us, with this proposed budget, so far our view into the budget has just been what the current administration has sort of outlined as their goals, also known as a skinny budget, if you hear that as well. And that budget, if it passes as is, would be devastating. Enormous cuts to critical HUD programs, enormous cuts to the voucher system. So it's going to take all of us to help remind people why those programs are so important in the first place. Earlier in the presentation, there was a slide with folks who live in Beacon housing. Those are the faces, those are the people that these programs either directly or indirectly help. So those are sort of the threats that we're facing. I will also add, even though the big beautiful budget doesn't directly impact many housing programs, that when folks don't have Medicaid, when folks don't have SNAP, it makes it harder for them to pay for housing too. So it does impact it. All this stuff is so interconnected and so important. So thank you again for inviting us to be part of this conversation.
Thank you so much, Jack. Really appreciate you and Senator Smith's work on this and for being here, and apologies for mispronouncing your name as well. I'm sorry for your last name there. So I know we tried to tell you that this would be an hour-long event, and of course it went over here. So appreciate your patience in that. We'll have one more final question for our panelists here. Then we'll wrap up with an action step and then call it a night there, and you can grab some more food and then also sign those cards in the back. But we want to close with our panel here with one final question of just for each one of you, all four here, if there's one thing you wanted people to know and understand about the moment we're in, what would it be? And let's start at the other side. Yep.
That local action, the more local you can get, ripples out. So just by showing up to this event tonight is huge, and we see it. And we're taking back this conversation to our housing team in DC and the senator, and never underestimate the impact that a small group of people can have. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. And I just want to reiterate that Senator Smyth is a huge partner in this work, and always feel free to reach out to our office for more information. Senator Smyth has introduced a lot of housing bills throughout the past couple of years to try to make these programs more resilient and work better and preserve the affordable housing that we have. Thank you.
What I'm nonprofits aren't optional or not nice to have. We're absolutely essential, and we're often the first places people turn when things fall apart, providing critical services across every community in the state and across the country. And so right now, the moment we're in is heavy, it's messy. You can probably hear it in my voice. It's emotional, it's loud, and it's layered with very real fear, real uncertainty, and very real stakes. And let's be clear, and I think you touched on this moment, while it may feel new to some, isn't new to all. The challenges we're facing now in terms of disinvestment and policy instability and lack of affordable housing are issues that have been the daily realities for many communities pushed to the margins for generations. What's hopefully changing in this moment is that these challenges are becoming harder to ignore. So yes, this is a hard moment, but I also believe, and I am holding on to hope anchored in action, that's also a moment to reimagine, reconnect, and rebuild. And I keep on coming back to these three things. First, let's learn from our past. The wisdom is there, the resilience, the solutions are there, especially in the communities we serve. We just have to be willing to really listen. Second, and this one is hard for me tonight, is hold on to our and compare how. For our neighbors, for our friends, for our family, for our coworkers, for ourselves, and even for the people we might not agree with. That's how we hold a community together. And third, continue to shine a light on the issues that matter, like affordable and supportive housing, on the people that matter, like our neighbors, because no one should have to fight this hard for a safe, stable place to call home. So I just want to invite us all to stay in it, keep asking the hard questions, keep listening, keep showing up in whatever ways that you can, and keep believing that something better is possible.
As we've touched on a couple of times, and Chris in particular mentioned it earlier about our imperfect, underfunded systems that we're working with here. That's where we started. And what's happened over the course of the last 4 or 5 years is that things have gotten exponentially more complicated and more expensive. So we started off with a system that wasn't quite what we needed it to be and was underfunded, and now it costs a hell of a lot more to do what we were trying to do to begin with. So in terms of the importance of the moment, that is something that there's no realm of what can we stomach in terms of a cut. We have to be moving forward as far as investment in this absolutely vital community infrastructure of housing here in Minnesota. So that's is that to kind of expand this again a little bit is as I do this work, as I've done this work, I've often said to people, that the notion of the 10, 15,000 households in Minnesota right now that are without proper housing, that's not what scares me. Because we've got really, really good machines. These organizations, we've cooked up these things. If you want to use the dike analogy, we've designed, hands with 9 thumbs on them now, and we know how to put them in all the holes. We've done really great work. Thousands of households each year are finding their way back into stable housing in our communities because of these great organizations and the community in which we get to work. What freaks me out is all of the people that are housing cost burdened. And those of you who have been around the Bring It Home campaign should be familiar with that language. We've been talking about this for a while. Because what's happening right now is that things are getting challenging, housing is getting is harder to reach, and everything's getting more expensive. So that housing cost burden that burden is getting heavier and heavier, and the gap between real wages and real housing costs is growing. And that's the really frightening thing to me, because that's what's at risk to completely overwhelm all of this, is that particular piece. So pay attention to that.
So I think a word cloud tonight of everything that's been said. One of the big words that would appear at the center of that cloud would be community. Community is a word that a lot of folks have said tonight. I've used it intentionally when I talk about our community solutions on homelessness. Community has always been a foundational pillar of any public system or solution that we hold, especially in a democracy where we, not a president, not a king, are responsible for one another and for our future. It's always been that way. And so, in the face of targets and threats to key programs that our community relies on, and when I say community, I certainly mean those who are direct beneficiaries and recipients of these solutions, but we are all beneficiaries of these solutions. Let's be clear. Makes all of our lives better, more livable, more secure. So in the face of targeting to these programs, we will defend them. In the face of lies about the role of these programs, about the people who benefit directly from these programs, about nonprofits that hold and carry these solutions together, we will tell the truth. That's why we're here tonight, is to learn the truth enough so we can be effective advocates in our community. And in the face of what may be an inevitable and unprecedented retreat of the federal government from its role and responsibility in American public life like we haven't seen since the Reagan administration. In the face of that kind of retreat, we will step forward and hold these solutions together, and in fact, may together find ourselves in a place where we have to write the next chapter with the kind of federal support that these solutions have historically relied on. That's going to require an extraordinary amount of community support and knowledge and power, and holding, in particular, our partners in state and local governments both accountable, responsible, and in collaboration to writing that next chapter together. It's going to require our voices. It's going to require our generosity. And so that's really the call to action tonight, is in the face of targets to these programs and the people they serve, we'll defend. We will defend, we will tell the truth, and we will step forward. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being a part of that community solution that we hold together. Thank you.
Well, let's give our panelists a huge round of applause. They were so great and so articulate. Thank you all for being here, for preparing those words and all the wisdom and knowledge that you've shared with everyone here. We really appreciate it, and thank you so much for it. We'll now move forward to our last step here around action. And so I'll invite up our West Metro organizer. Many of you know him and work with him, Mohammed Jama, often called MJ, to just tell you a little bit about the immediate action tonight. And then we'll end with, again, with Pastor Hollis closing us out.
Then you can hold the mic. I think I can.
Yeah, can you actually stand here for the live stream?
My name is Mohammed Jama.
Use the mic so that they can hear you in the
Sorry. I thought we were just all by ourselves, but yeah. Hello there. My name is Mohammed Jama. I go by MJ. I am the organizer in suburban Hennepin. I want to say thank you for coming. With all that's happening, you took the time today to come and hear our panelists, but hear each other as a community. As Beacon, we just don't talk the talk, but we walk the walk. One of the main things we want to do this summer, throughout this summer, is to talk to our legislators, our federal legislators. We have postcards in your chairs, 2 different postcards. If your legislator is not that individual in the postcard, we will make sure that we get you a postcard that says your legislator. We want you to put your name, your address, your email, and Beacon will send that out to your legislator. But we will be doing this throughout the summer, throughout your congregation, through your community. Please let your members of your churches know, your faith space, about this. This is an initiative that we want to make sure that the federal government, especially those who represent us, hear us. The panelists send the message. We're there now to deliver it to our legislators. So thank you for coming.
So please fill out those cards tonight. We had an error with the printer, and we were supposed to have both senators to have cards, and we just have a Senator Smyth card. So we'll get you a Klobuchar card later and follow up. And we have lots of stacks of these to follow up with your congregations and to do these in your services and really make your issues known. If you don't have, I think we handed out the Representative Morrison cards. We have there, if you're from St. Paul or Minneapolis and want cards for those legislators, we can get you those. And if you're beyond that realm, we don't have blank ones tonight, but we can get those for you at a later date. So this is just kicking off the action we're doing to begin handing these out. So please fill these out tonight and turn them in. We will deliver them ourselves for that. I know we have a couple questions here. Just to, so we're not taking open comments. We'll be happy to talk to you. We want to kind of close down the event, but I'm happy, and the panelists were happy to discuss this after you. But we're going to invite Pastor Hollis up to close down the event. We'll turn off the live stream, and then we're happy to discuss with folks in the community and answer any questions around some of these pieces. So thank you.
Well, again, thank you for joining us here. Thank you for making this place a home for this meeting. We are glad to be partners with Beacon and glad to be in community with all of you today. I invite you now into another word of prayer. You made us out of nothing, and you made us to live together in relationship, in community, to care for one another, to care for this world, and to do everything we can to help and serve you and these beautiful people that we live with. Each of us is only the size and shape and ability of what we are, and can only do that what each of us can do. But when we gather together, When you bring us together and we work together as a force of people, as a community, we can do amazing things. Draw us together, unite us in our desire to see a better life and better world for all, and send us out as strong as we are together so that we might be a part of making the changes that need to happen. In your name we pray. Amen.